welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here today for a very special event. And hopefully by now you've had a chance to watch the on-demand webinar that we sent out early this week. So it's been up there for quite a few days. We did notice there was a pretty good number of views. So judging from those views, there's been many of you who have now had the opportunity to watch that. All right, well, let's get started here. We'll introduce my fellow compatriots here in the room.
Yeah.
And let's kick her off with Hank Boomershine. Hank, you're to our left here.
Yep.
And Hank, you're a USBC Gold Level coach.
Yep.
And you also run our R&D and our sales. And
yep.
We're very integral throughout the webinar.
Yep.
And thanks for being here. And Zach Trevino, Zach to my right here. Zach, you're a technical developer, so you help produce all those documents that we see on ball motion and understanding the unique components of the bowling balls we release. And as well with the webinar, there was a lot of great information. You're involved heavily with the testing and drilling of the bowling balls, understand the difference in ball motion. And,
absolutely. I'm also the guru behind the stream here, so if something screws up, it's on me, guys. We can you can just spam the chat. Zach, fix it, and right. I'll just go like this.
That's right. Now, spam the chat. That was an important part of this because the reason that we're doing this here is so you're able to submit your questions. So you have to be logged into your Google account in order to be able to add a comment below. But that's one of the main things and one of the reasons that we're here today is we wanted to give you a few days to watch the video, make some notes, address some questions, and be able to submit them here today. So we're going to be live and able to address those questions and address anything that you might have that has come up. Now we've got a couple more individuals in the room here. Kendall Miles. Kendall's our technical customer support, answers a lot of questions and emails from you, the Pro Shop professional, or from our consumers looking for advice on how to lay out and drill that bowling ball, how to understand the ball motion. Kendall's in a unique position here as well. He has had a lot of success with just in these few short weeks here with the Physix as well.
Yes,
so
this is true.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But Kendall, thanks for being here.
Welcome, guys. I'm glad you can join us.
And we're glad to have you. And then off on the side here, Ernest Godick. Ernest is our inside sales manager. So he's the main point of contact here in the office for all of you who deal with your Storm RSM. They work with Ernest here and then work with Hank on their communications back here and help serve all of your Pro Shop and all your business needs. So Ernest, thanks for being here as well. And Ernest and Kendall are going to be fielding and screening all the questions that you guys have that you add to the bottom here of the chat. So we're going to be referring to that back and forth throughout today, just seeing exactly what questions are popping up, and we'll go back and forth and make a few of those notes as they do come up. And I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important enough to note again, why the webinar format. And many of you, we saw you last year and the year before. We did a series of roundtable seminars, right, Hank?
Yep.
Around the country. Saw a lot of you in person. Gave you some great information on our, like last year was our intents, for example. Had some real insightful videos and some information that helped understand the effect of balance holes,
sure.
and layouts, a lot of great detailed information. Chad McLean put that together last year. Chad's not here today.
Yeah, no guns. No guns on the
guns.
stream today. Yeah,
my shirt's a little loose.
We missed our website model today.
Let's do this.
Yeah, I know.
He's on his way back from Japan
or something. He's back from Japan. He has a good excuse for not being here today. So, but you noticed a lot of that great information that Chad put together and has been a very important part of putting together all of these PowerPoint presentations that you saw this year and in the past several years. So. But as far as the format goes, there were a lot of you that asked as a Pro Shop professional, said, it'd be great to have this information, but sometimes it's tough to leave the shop. Maybe the times don't work out, the dates don't work out. And if there's a way that I could get this good information and watch it on my own time, on my own schedule, I'd prefer that. So that's why we went with this format this year. And the early feedback is that it's been positive, and it's maybe something we can do again in the future. But again, thanks for being here today, and we definitely appreciate your business and appreciate your time and attention watching this. Hopefully you got some good information out of it. Okay, let's dig in. There was one thing that I wanted to start with, a key point that I noticed in this webinar when I watched it, something that really kind of caught me a little bit off guard. And I think it's a good thing to pick up and discuss today, which is the ball motion characteristics for all three of our players. We had three distinct styles, if you recall when you watched that video. We had Suling, who was our stroker, played the straightest, more from the outside, more direct, little lower rev rate. We had Lindsay Boomershine. She was our tweener, kind of our medium rev rate and medium line player. And then we had our cranker, which was Chad McLean, who had the highest rev rate and opened up the lanes the most. And these three players had three distinct differences in ball motions, even with the exact same layout. So say, for example, when I was watching this, I was noticing that we had Su Ling with a 5-inch pin to pap was playing the most direct from the outside. For Chad McLean, it was exactly the opposite. Right. It was the deepest inside. Right. So for me, that just kind of reiterated how important it is to understand and know the characteristics of your player when you're drilling up a ball for a customer that walks in your shop. Hank, what do you think about?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing we see all the time, Steve, is that, you know, somebody says, hey, we'll just use a 4x4x2 layout, but it might not match up. I mean, and that might become a very conditional ball for a player like Chad, where he's probably going to get more success out of a 5-inch pin because his rev rate's so high that if he uses a 4-inch pin, it revs up too fast and he forces his angles to be too steep in the front. So the 5-inch pin gives him a little bit more versatility in that layout, but yet you go to Su Ling, that 5-inch pin, it's a down and in ball because she never creates enough rev rate to get that ball to kind of spin around on its axis.
Really different from player to player.
And then Lindsay finds it in between, so it's it's very unique.
Yeah, it is, and it really shows why it's so important to know the style of your customer, right? I mean, knowing
absolutely.
Your player. I mean, a lot of times, say somebody comes in off the street and they want to get a bowling ball drilled. You know, a lot of times, from what we hear from a lot of shops, is the first thing you do is take them down the lane so you can understand their style. You have to get their PAP, number one.
Absolutely.
How are you going to drill a layout if you don't know their PAP?
Right.
So, and then, you know, the other thing with a lot of players is that their measurements, the PAP measurements, change over time.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe you do have it, but maybe it's been 3-4 years since you measured it. You've been drilling off that same PAP. Maybe their tracks change. Maybe it's adjusted. Maybe their tilt and rotation's a little bit different. And now you're all of a sudden what you think is a 4x4x2 or 5x3x4 layout is no longer because their PAP has changed. So even if you do have that measurement for your customers, make sure you go in and, you know, they say periodically remeasure and check and see where they're at, because we all do change over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Kendall's been here for a little bit, you know, year and a half or so, and just his game's evolved. I bowl league with Kendall quite a bit, and his
rev rates dropped recently. We have talked about that. He used to be about 875 RPMs. He's
at least
he's down to about 7.25, I think, just to control the break. Right? Is that right?
It's not just the field to catch up a little bit. I can't break the lane down too much. I mean, that's just rude. That's rude. I gotta leave some for some people.
Right. That college gunslinging doesn't quite work.
Chop the pattern up. That's
appreciate
the Weber way. Chop the pattern up.
There's no defense in bowling until then.
The Weber way. I like that.
But the thing to remember though is the VLS system that we've had out for several years. It really, you plug that data in, and that data might spit out for one player the 5-inch pin and the other player the 4-inch pin, but they want to play on the same pattern, and it's just really dependent on the speed, the rev rate, those tilts and rotations, and so, this just really kind of backs that up even more with what we saw out of these players and these styles.
Yeah, definitely does. And Kendall now, he's had, along with the rest of our staff, they've had the ability now to use the Physix in league for maybe 2-3 weeks or so. I think Kendall
2-3 weeks.
And you know, right now, as of from what I've heard, Kendall's average is about 254 or so, I think, for your
somewhere in that range.
Your first 3 weeks of competition with the Physix. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you've seen and what you've noticed with the Physix being different from some of the other Premier Line balls that you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. It's special. I mean, I can't get that ball out of my hand to start. With the higher rev rate, someone likes to move in more. Throwing those bigger ASIM, the strong ASIM balls, they kind of bog down on the lane sometimes, even though I do need that.
Because of your rev rate.
Yeah, I do need that back end motion, even though it was reading the lane the right way. The Physix just keeps going. I'm able to move in. I really can't get too deep with the ball. I mean, it reads and been like extremely strong, and sometimes you have to sacrifice one. If you get the ball to read the mid lane the right way, you lose some down lane motion, and if you get the ball to back in the right way, you don't see the mids right. But this ball does both for me. So I'm definitely going to have at least 2 or 3. So mine is actually very similar to Chad's. The 5x3.
3x4.
Yeah. So Chad and I actually have a lot of the same layouts as well. We thought about pretty similar.
Both high rev players.
Yeah, exactly. And one special thing about this ball the NRG hybrid, that's what makes this, that's what separates it, in my opinion. The atomic core is extremely special, extremely unique as well. But taking that NRG, that nano cover, and making it a hybrid, that's extremely special to me. That's what separates this ball from different molds as well. So that's one thing to pay attention to when you're drilling that ball for your customer. One
of the things I've heard about that, which is definitely pretty rare nowadays, that the Physix, you're actually able to use it and have used it these 3 weeks, all 3 games.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, an asymmetrical, a good high-end, high-performance asim is good for games 1, maybe 1.5.
Right,
If you're lucky, you can squeeze out 2.
Sure.
Right.
But when you've got 3-4 players on a lane for a set, a lot of times you can't use it in game 3.
Right, yeah. I mean, once again, it's kind of mentioned back to the Sherlock. Great for the fresh. I haven't had a ball that's been better for the fresh since I've been here. And yeah, I get about a game and a half, and it starts to just, not do the right thing. And yeah, the Physix, I've been able to throw it into game 1, game 2, game 3, and if I need to, I bet I can throw it into game 4 and 5 if needed.
That's right.
But yeah, it is. And once again, we've talked about this a little bit, but the Physix makes a different sound. And it's tough to explain, and the guys kind of make fun of me about this, but imagine a very thin, paper thin glass, and you throw a marble at a glass. It kind of makes a different sound.
So cracking noise.
Yeah, it's special. It's going to be fun to throw for when you guys get in your hand and your customer's hand. It's going to be fun to throw.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. It's good stuff.
And the beauty thing of that is I was just over in Korea and Japan.
Yeah.
And the Sam Ho Cup was 43.
You came right from Terminal B
I did.
to the office.
I did.
Fresh off the plane. Still jet lagging.
Hank landed 2 hours ago.
I got 3 hours of sleep in the last 48 hours, so it's kind of. But yeah, I was at the Sam Ho Cup and got to drill several of these Physix for a lot of different players between Liz Johnson and Danielle McEwen. Lindsay had one over there. And JoJo Yanaporn, and then several of the players. Darren Tang absolutely just waylaid him for the fresh. And then Liz Johnson wins the title with Physix, playing against one of our Korean staffers over there. So it was an all Physix final. That 43
nice.
pattern, they just made it look different. It was fun to watch. Lindsay used it on the fresh. Francois used it a little bit on the fresh. It was just it seemed like every player had it in their hand, and then we just did some seminars across Japan, and Belmo. I was with Belmo and Danielle in the travels across Japan, and Belmo first night he shoots 300, 258, 268 with the ball, and he says, "Mate, this is something different."
Oh wow!
And he's not a big, huge fan of ASIMs either.
He's throwing high roads.
Not a total surprise.
And Danielle, it's funny because Danielle said the same thing. She goes, she had a pin up one and a pin down one. And she went from a pin up on the fresh to a pin down on the burn because she could just get it to not lose energy too fast and have a little more continuation down lane. Yeah. So she said I could go the 1-2 punch with these 2 balls, and she was very pleased with what she saw out of it. And kind of funny is Belmo usually likes to leave his balls in Japan and sign them and give them away. He's like, "Mate, I'm going to take these with me to Oklahoma."
So we might be seeing them on TV.
You might be seeing them on TV, absolutely.
Via Japan, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think Liz had 290 in the championship match even, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Man. That's something. It would have been fun to have been there. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. So, it was fun to watch. It was fun to watch an all Physix final. It was just
pretty
really
special there.
Yeah, that's cool and pretty rare for sure.
Yeah, how often you get to see that? A ball fresh out of the plant.
Yeah, right.
All Physix final. That's
exactly.
Once again, a little different there.
Yeah. Hey, we touched on this a little bit in the seminar. It was a little bit more kind of near the end of it, but we were talking a little bit about the new USBC rules and on static weights. And why don't we talk about that just a little bit too?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for as long as time that we know, we had this 1 ounce box that we would work within that was, referencing our grip center. We had a little 1 ounce box for static imbalance for left side to right side. Finger to thumb, and you had the 3 ounce limit for top weight, but it was a much smaller box as far as side weight and finger to thumb weight. And now, as of August 1st, we have a much bigger window to work within. So now we have, as you likely know, 3 ounce limit for left to right side, finger to thumb. So we have a much bigger area that we can get that center of gravity reference to the grip center that we're able to use. Now, as a reminder for everybody, if you are going to utilize that extra window for maybe 2.5 ounces of side weight, 2 3/4 or something, you can't additionally use a balance hole.
Right.
You got to use one or the other. They call it no double dipping. You can't double dip. You can't have the excessive amount of side weight and the balance hole. So. Balance holes are still going to be legal for another couple years, just about. But for as of right now, there's a lot of our staff are experimenting and utilizing some of these new wider range of layouts that maybe they haven't been able to use before.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's come about, this is very important for you as a pro shop operator, when you are determining, in the past, if we wanted a ball with a pin very close, like maybe a short pin buffer where it's closer to the VAL, and we wanted it, above and away from the ring finger. A lot of times we'd be searching specifically for maybe a 4.5, 5-inch pin out, because that's what we, that was the layout we wanted. And maybe we didn't want a hole, but we had a limited amount of sideway you could use. Really, the difference now is much less important, less significant. So these layouts, when you're thinking about, making sure you want safe, even for example, the 1-inch distance between the edge of the finger hole and the edge of the pin that we ask for. That's really not necessary anymore, because now, as far as the limitations for static weights, that's going to be legal. So you've got that opportunity as well. But there's a lot of people that have seen differences in their ball motion and ball reaction and pin carry, even by adjusting the center of gravity positions to different spots than what they've had before. So that's something that's come about recently, and that's been an important part of development in our sport as well. And on the pro shop side, no more important than it is to you as a pro shop professional to understand and know exactly what those rules are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Zach, why don't you talk just a little bit about that? Because, pro shop experience, I know all of us in here have had pro shop experience, but I'd say you're the most recent. As far as
because I'm the youngest.
Your work down in Texas, you worked at Ballard Bowling Solutions, and have a very recent history with the pro shops. And as far as just determining, and when you're trying to match up a 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch pin out or so, trying to find the right ball for the layouts that you're selecting or so. What's
Well, and before when we saw that, and it's not uncommon, especially like we'll just use an ASIM for an example. If you ended up with, say it was intense fire, or you had an intense or something like that, and you had a customer to come in and you mapped everything out, got all their specs, and they wanted something, let's say for example, like a 5.52 or a 5, even a 5.42, anything, again, like you talked about with a shorter pin buffer. Yeah. A lot of times, if you didn't get, that longer pin out distance, unless you were able to bury one of the fingers, you'd end up having to place a hole up. Yeah. In this case, a hole closer to the top of the weight block, top of that pin, and you could lower differential just simply because of the box you were in with statics. Yeah. You don't have that anymore, right? So, you don't have to do that. It's not that the CG location altered how the ball rolled. It was the fact that you had to remove some mass. That's right. Statically. Now, you just don't need that. So I actually think it's a positive thing. It opens up some windows and some opportunities. Gives you more options. It's going to help shops, distributors, everything like that. I think it's just one of those factors that, again, with these big asymmetric weight blocks, it'll just gives you more freedom as a ball driller, and freedom's always a good thing.
A little bit more freedom. Yeah, that's totally right. Good stuff. All right, do we have a question that's come in? Kendall, why don't you just kick us off with a good question that's come in from who it is, who submitted the question. Absolutely. Read the question.
You have to pronounce their name perfectly.
I was going to say, bear with me
if
if I pronounce your name wrong. I'll do my best.
All right. Well, why don't you go and read her out, and then we'll decide who tackles it.
We have Mike Machuga here. First question. Given the same cover stock, how would a higher differential with, let's say, 5.5 pin compared to a lower diff with, let's say, 4.5 pin to PAP?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. Hank, you want to tackle that one?
So say that again.
Given the same cover stock, how would a higher differential with, let's say, 5.5-inch pin compared to a lower diff and, let's say, 4.5-inch pin to PAP?
You're looking at Mike. Hey, thanks for the question. Thanks for tuning in. Really,
that's a good question.
So a lot of times in that higher differential bowling ball, say it's a 5.5-inch pin, it just really depends on how much differential it is, how much flare you're going to create, and also too is if it's asymmetrical, because an asymmetrical ball is going to create a little more flare at a 5.5-inch pin than a symmetrical ball will. Yeah. And then if the 4.5-inch pin to PAP is in a lower differential ball, it's a stronger pin, so it's an inch stronger, but it's still really dependent on if it's 30 differential or it's 50 differential. The 50 differential ball at 5.5 inches is going to definitely see a little bit more flare versus the 30 differential ball at 4.5. If they're really close to each other, like say between 40 and 50, those balls are going to get actually pretty close to each other because a 5.5 versus a 4.5, you're probably going to get pretty similar amount of flare out of those balls. And really the RG, the differences in the RG is going to have something to do with that as well too. So, I mean, differential is just one part of the equation, but we know the RG values can delay that before it starts to flare. So, I mean, it can create two different shapes in motion. If you have a low RG with a little more differential and it's a 5.5-inch pin, you could see the lane a little faster and still flare quite a bit. Versus if it's you're doing a 4.5-inch pin in a lower diff ball but it has a higher RG, it's not going to see the lane as soon because it has to slow down no matter what.
You could have maybe some different migration path too. Might be a little bit different depending on the core shape.
Sure, yeah. Asymmetrical in a straight line, and if you're in a symmetrical ball, it's going to be more of an arc around that pin. Yeah. So and it will dictate a little bit of that ball motion and shape too. But
I think along those same lines, when you're looking at adjusting the distances from the pin to pap on the different differentials, you're trying to control how much flare potential you're getting, how much flare you're getting in the oil, how much in the dry, and that's going to be a big dictator as far as ball motion goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, your ball motion goes.
Does that help, Mike? Does that answer the question?
Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Hopefully.
It's a great topic. Yeah, it's a great topic.
I got another one in here. So as we know, we released the Physix. We also had a ball, the High Road X came out as well. So there's a couple of questions in here about that.
Okay.
I have one from Vince in Beer. Is the High Road X the same as the normal High Road? If not, what's the difference?
Oh, okay. Zach, you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're taking a look at High Road X, first off, it is different. It's a different shell. We wanted to celebrate the kind of just remember all the great memories that we all have with High Roads.
We have lots of them.
But it isn't just a commemorative ball, and it's also not a limited run ball. This is a full catalog release. The biggest difference, it's still going to feature that just amazing FE2. Weight block that's in it. That
seems to roll good for everybody.
That's just about everyone.
Weight blocks.
Very true.
It's so unique.
But it's going to be prepped with R2X solid reactive. So where you normally have R2S hybrid on a traditional high road, what we saw with the slight tweak in cover allowed, and Steve actually threw it. You can see that in the presentation. We had a nice video kind of showcasing. A lot of
different angles too. It was like wow. It was different releases and angles, and I was able to play all over the lane. And and with it's one of those things that we've had R2S on the high road for so long now, 10 years. R2S hybrid, I should say, and the patterns change, right? These lane surfaces change. You've got more centers that are upgrading surfaces, and the way that the patterns have kind of evolved, we felt that R2X would really give another shape and add another fine-tuning parameter to the high road family already, which is already pretty stellar. But this is going to allow it reads the middle of the pattern a little bit better. Not quite like NRG. NRG like on the High Road Nano is definitely going to be a lot sooner, much larger footprint in the oil. Yeah, that's for sure.
But still prepped at 1500 grit polish. It just gives a little bit more roundness, I think. That's kind of what I saw. Again, you threw it. And we've internally testing wise, that's what we've seen. But it's definitely different. I would say it's a ball. It's also really good with some surface changes. R2X adapts to that, so it's going to be a little bit stronger. All in all, you're not going to see necessarily a bigger jump, more flare. It's just a little shape change, but it's going to adhere to those players, especially the players that are going down up the lane that like to control that shape. You don't want something that really jerks, that really snaps. Whereas a high road pearl might overskid and just miss it a little bit. The new High Road X is really going to shape well, and even for the higher rev players, it's just fun. It's a fun ball to throw. It shapes just.
Who doesn't
really
like a black bowling ball?
Well,
I mean, let's be honest.
Well,
here.
let's
We're talking to bowlers.
Let's go
who
there
like
too.
A black bowling ball?
But to answer the question, now that I've dragged that out forever, it is a different ball with a different shell.
Now the one thing too, and I have seen this just even in our facility downstairs, shelf appeal. I mean, this thing looks good, and I got to imagine in just about every single store around the nation that this thing on the wall, that ball it's a beautiful looking bowling ball. Performance wise is there phenomenal, but I got to imagine just about everybody that walks into your store and picks it up and looks at it is they're gonna be in awe. So that's cool. All right, what else we got?
We got a couple of surface questions here. First one is from Jeff Baker, asking myself, Kendall, what surface change did you make to your Physix? And we've had a conversation about this, him and I, a few times, because he'll call in, well, what do you truly throw? How do you really throw your ball? Actually, I didn't touch it.
I hope you say with a lot of revs.
Yeah, I actually didn't touch it. I threw it out of the box the first night, shot around 750 or so.
Yeah.
Then we do bowl on a second bowling center, spare time lanes.
Yeah.
It's a lot slicker lane surface. And Zach and I spoke about this quite often. It's a pretty tough center, as we all are aware of.
It can be.
And I ended up just crushing that ball at surface. I put about 1,000 to 2,000 on it, and it just kept facing up. I really thought that I might get that kind of flat 10 reaction, and yeah, I was just totally surprised that what I normally would have expected that ball to kind of quit on me, it just somehow the 6 did the right thing at the 10. So the beauty of especially this ball itself is it does take a lot of surface changes. I also did throw a little bit of 4,000 lighter polish on it, and just very smooth, extremely smoothly controllable. So yeah, I've found many services success with this ball thus far, and I hope you guys can as well. Cool. And then leading into the next question, John Z is asking, did we make any surface changes for the Physix during the webinar?
Oh. Any surface changes for the Physix? As I understand it, as far as our testing goes, it was box finish.
Box finish
for all of those. Yep. And based off of trying to get an idea ball motion wise, it was really based off the difference in the layouts for each of the 3 players. But as far as surface goes, it was the same 3,000 grit finish all the way throughout.
But like all of our balls, we also all the time is that the versatility of the cover stocks. Basically, if you want to bring them up, like Kendall was talking about, to 4,000 or take them down to 1,000, and I think I took Shaolin's ball to 500. In the one block, because Shaolin likes to throw a little firm there in Korea, and it was 43 feet, and so I said, "Here, Shaolin, let me have that." So I hit it with 500.
She likes to throw it firm in Korea and in Malaysia and in the US,
around the world,
wherever. Yeah.
So we put a little more surface on it, and it, like I said, it responded great to it. And the nice thing is about it, these covers that we've developed over the last decade and a half here are extremely versatile, and does give you the option to do many different surfaces with them.
Yeah. And that is a nice thing, to be able to touch it up, get more motion out of it, but not lose the back end reaction.
Right.
That's definitely a big thing. Okay, good stuff. Good question.
Oh yeah.
We have any more rolling in?
We have Vincent Beard chimed in again. So we have. So does it hook more and earlier, or is it either or in that in the High Road X that Zach was talking about?
Gotcha.
I can share my
Steve,
experience
go ahead.
on that, because I did throw it quite a few times and on different patterns, and have compared the High Road X and the High Road Pearl and the original one several times. And really, for me, what I noticed is a lot of that did depend on what the lane condition was. If it was a pattern that I was testing on that was maybe built up a little bit heavier volume through the body of the pattern, and then maybe it was a little bit of a cliff where you would see a little bit more responsiveness down lane, I would see more of a difference with High Road Pearl and High Road X, and original High Road, that would then take and corner and make up the difference. If it was a little bit more tapered, I would definitely notice more hook overall and a little bit sooner motion out of the High Road X. So
Very cool. We have a question from Perfect Fit Pro Shop, and this is at Hank Boomershine. Was this the test ball that you had us throw at Vegas this year?
Yes, it was. This was the shape.
They're on to us.
We had the atomic. We had the atomic core in 3 different covers. Excuse me, and then this. Basically, the Pro Shops made the decision on the final cover. We were a couple different versions of some covers. One that was we had great success with. Some 2 other covers that we were just doing some very preliminary testing on, and so we brought it to Vegas. And so it was one of those ones that
great question there.
Absolutely, that was kind of teed that one right up.
We have one from Buffa Bowling Distributor.
All right.
What is the difference between the new Physix and our famous Phase 2?
Steve. It's the Steve ball.
The
Phase SK.
Phase 2. Yeah. I got to tell you that, well, they starts with the right 2 letters, right? The PH, because I can't get a Phase 2 out of my hand as competition-wise. That always goes with me as a benchmark ball. But the Physix for this one, it corners harder. The Phase 2, I would say, is more of a benchmark type of a ball because it's arcier off the spot, but it allows me to play some different angles. You can go up the boards, you can go away from it, and on a little bit wider variety of conditions. This ball is more aggressive, more responsive, opens up the back ends more. For me, a lot of times when I'm bowling on the fresh, I'm lined up really good. I feel good. As soon as that lane breaks down and I got to move inside, I don't have a big rev rate, so a lot of times my ball kind of scoots through there. So this would be where I would go from a Phase 2, and then I would ball up to the Physix as I move inside, because I need a little bit extra help getting that ball around the corner.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a great ball to play off of, arsenal-wise, off of a Phase 2, and it's a step up for me.
Yeah, symmetric versus asymmetric, so you're definitely going to get a more defined
Yep.
shot shape and preferred spin axis. So, yeah.
One of these days, I'm going to get my rev rate like Mark Bufus, but
that guy throws it pretty good.
He throws it pretty good.
Steve, would you say
if he'll loan me a few revs, I might be able to.
Yeah, him and Kendall. Yeah,
and Kendall.
I live with it, Kendall, and I can't I can't barely sniff 400. Steve, would you say that maybe that Physix could have come in handy at the Masters?
It would.
Okay,
it absolutely would have. Yep.
Yeah.
That would have come in handy. Would have gotten that a little bit more around the corner, and they were tight there. We were talking about surface wise. I mean, it was a fresh 500 pad or 1,000 many rounds there on that pattern. There was a lot of oil down there, even though it wasn't that long. There was so much oil through the front part. And, a lot of people don't look at that too, as far as oil conditions go and lane patterns. A lot of times they just think, well, it's the 39 foot or it's the 37, it's the 41. Sure. But you can have a 41-foot pattern that we know that hooks a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean,
if there's not that much volume.
Yeah, if there's not some 2-2s in the front to try to create that load, and you could have a 39-foot pattern that has say 6 or 7 loads of 2-2s that go way down the lane.
The Masters had about 12 of them. 12 2-2s. It felt like it at least.
Sure. Well, the Utah Open pattern I think had 12 2-2s in it.
That's right. So, all right, good stuff.
We have one from Mike Machuga again.
Chugs.
With all the talk about effects or lack thereof, static weight affects ball motion. Could static weight affect release, i.e., axis tilt, rotation, and/or rev rate?
Norm Duke.
Can static weights affect the release? That's a.
I mean, in some situations, if you did get enough static weight, say you were maxed out to a 3-ounce positive window, and if a player has a tremendous amount of feel or touch, a guy like Duke, a guy like Machuga has a lot of touch.
Absolutely.
Guys have a lot of touch and a lot of feel, and it's a kind of a lost art in the sport of bowling. We kind of all go after it anymore. The EJ Tackett's of the worlds, the Belmos, the touches are. It's not as much, and you got a lot more players that are they're full tilt most of the time. Probably wouldn't see it as much, but a player who's a little more touch player, feel player, or a player that's a little more direct, might feel a little imbalanced. And once again, you got to remember that imbalance window is so small, but half of it is a little bit of a mental approach as well too, because if they know that there's a lot of static balance to one side, they might feel like they can feel it. But I would say it'd be really difficult. I mean, you could probably try to get some sensors or kinetic feel in motion to see if you could actually see a load ratio change.
Those grip pressure.
There's some testing that probably could be done to see, but once again, this 3-ounce rule is so new. And I know that Norm's one of those players that likes to take it out to a certain static and bring it back to a certain static because he likes the way that feels in his hand. And that's nothing wrong with that. But, I mean, still the majority of mass and weight is still dictated from, where the x-axis or pin is in the bowling ball. And the farther the pin gets away from the center of the palm or center of the grip, I think you would feel more of that x-axis imbalance necessarily than the static imbalance. But, once again,
I can tell you, without a loose arm swing, you wouldn't feel anything. You talk about, Mike, yourself, and Norm Duke, and these. I mean, that's the kind of that's something I think all bowlers strive to have, but it's very, very rare that one can achieve that.
I'm gonna squeeze it with 3 ounces or 1.5 ounces. It doesn't matter. I'm yanking it down from the top.
All right.
So we have one more from Bufa. And we're all tournament bowlers here. We work hard, but we do like to bowl on the weekends. All 4 of us, Ernest as well. So I have a question from Bufa.
Hold on. You said Ernest likes to bowl on the weekend?
Ernest bowls on the
Ernest, when's the last time you bowled on the weekend?
Ernest, you're holding out on us.
I teed that one up for you, bro. I teed that one up for you, bro. I was hoping. I knew Zach would hop on that for me.
Thank you.
Me and him are right there. I knew he'd.
Ernest is the same color as Hank's shirt right now.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that one before. You okay, E?
Tuesday nights.
So how would the Phase 2 and the Physix fit in your tournament arsenal? So from week in to week out, where does it fit before or after what ball, and when would you throw it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, good question. As far as looking at maybe, say, a complete arsenal, for me, I have a couple of balls that would be a step down, which, a lot of times you can use a step down ball on the fresh. If you're looking for a little bit more control, it could be an IQ Tour. It could be even as far down as a pitch black. But actually, the matchup black pearl has been a fantastic sort of a step down ball if I need something that's more controllable. And the cool thing on that is that sometimes you can use a ball like that, like I say, either on the fresh when the back ends are real jerky and you're trying to kind of stay out of trouble, kind of minimize the damage if it's a really low scoring, tough, flat oil pattern, or if maybe something that you go to real late in the day when the lanes get super burned up and you're just trying to get something down the lane. So that's what I use for below. As far as above, the Sherlock is still one of my best aggressive, heavy oil, big bowling balls, but it doesn't give me the back end that I see out of the Physix. So this Physix has been a good high-end, high-performance big ball for me.
Yes, Steve, if we want to touch on it, and actually we're showing the folks our Doppler testing that we did comparing the Sherlock and Physix.
Excellent.
If you wouldn't mind kind of diving into a little bit of that and really describing the change in shape, I think that's something that it's kind of that next level thinking. And when you have you have those tournament bowlers and those guys that, and again, even with the amount of loads and oil on house shots, we're seeing Sherlocks and these stronger balls absolutely come into play. They're great on those types of patterns. But just kind of describe a little bit of the difference in, like I said, in shape versus overall hook.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that a lot of bowlers, when they come in, they only think about hook just being like what hooks the most and what hooks the least. They don't really look at what is going to get into the earliest roll or what's going to hook the most or the least in the mid lane, what's going to give you the most traction. For the Sherlock, for me, I get that ball. I typically will play a little bit deeper as far as the laydown goes, because it does pick up and read earlier, but I can't get it out near as far to the outside as I can with the Physix. So even though it hooks more, it hooks sooner, it's a more aggressive ball, that doesn't necessarily mean that ball is going to be coming in from more to the outside or create more angle down lane, because it doesn't. It's a more aggressive ball, but it slows down, it reads it, it has an earlier break point, but it's more of an arcing shape, so the transition would be slower. It's not going to be as fast. It's going to be a slower transition, which is going to be that smoother, softer, more arcing shape. And then the entry angle is going to be a little bit less. So your entry angle is going to be just a little bit more controlled. Again, great on the fresh when the back end's hooked plenty on a longer, heavier volume pattern, or sometimes when I'm using that phase 2 and then it's time to move in, and let's say the Physix is that I move into a pile of oil, I'm moving into a place where maybe other people weren't playing. Now all of a sudden I can jump up a couple of balls, go right to the Sherlock, and then now I've got something again that can get me back to the pocket when the area where I started out breaks down in the heads in the mid lane and it forces me in. If I move into a ton of oil, then I'm going to need to ball up maybe a couple of balls.
Sure. Excellent. Yeah, good response there. And for you pro shop guys, I mean, that's all of that again, and we touched on it earlier, is going to vary on the style of bowler. If you got somebody that's got 65 degrees of axis rotation, where they're going to use these pieces are going to be different than 25 or 30 degrees, even if you have the same rev rate. You got guys, it's all about that shape, and the more that you can know your bowlers and know kind of their game and just really just convey what they're looking to get out of the ball too. Communication's huge. The better that you can match them up with a Physix, a Sherlock, a Hyrodex, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once piggybacking off of what Zach says as well, all of those factors as well as surface change as well. Getting that player that's 65 degrees axis rotation, they can modify their surface as well to get to roll better for them. So keep that in mind too when you're laying out that ball.
That's true.
But I'm gonna put Hank on the spot here a little bit. So we talked about myself, we talked about Steve, we talked about a couple of different players throwing the ball. What do you see from the left side? Where do you see on the left side of the lane with that ball?
Biggest thing I've seen out of the Physix so far on the left side lane is that we know that this ball is very responsive off the dry, so it does have a very quick transition. And the thing about the left is less traffic, and so sometimes on the patterns that are blended a little bit more and in a house pattern situation, you're going to see a lot more shape middle down lane. But sometimes even on the flattest of patterns, you don't necessarily see the ball shape as much through the body of the lane because there's still so much volume in the lane. It still will create a lot of shape off the back end. A lot of times on the left, we try to use a little bit more surface, and we use probably a little bit stronger layouts to begin with because there's less traffic, and so you have to use something that's going to pick up and start getting the ball into motion. And like Steve said, this might be a go-to ball off of, for me, still, I'm a big fan, like I said, Steve, is Sherlock's and Halo actually as well too. I like the solid covers, and I know that's it's our in the other family of the rotor grip side, but still like to see that ball in the fresh. And as the pattern breaks down and we start to have to shape it, Physix, what we see on the left is it does read it stronger, does have a lot more change of direction. So a lot of times on the left, you're trying to get it to a spot, and the track doesn't get as wide or blended out or open or fanned out. So you do need a ball that you know that it's going to read it and come off the spot, and so the Physix definitely gives me or the left a little bit more of that.
And you touched on that too, Hank. I was just thinking about that. The 3x5x1, for example, that's the one that, as far as Chad and Lindsay go, that was allowed them to play more to the right, just meaning that it's the lane's going to transition more, so it kind of smooth it out a little bit. So that might be
that's the same thing.
You said a little stronger layout.
One of my favorite layouts, 3-5-1.
Yeah.
I mean, that's phase 2. I've had a couple of those with
big honor scores.
With those balls, just because. Especially on the left, you got to get it to slow down, and you got to get it to transition quickly, and so that's always been a good shape, and a good layout for me. And I did put one in this Physix, and it does give a lot of motion, but it does give a little more change of direction. So sometimes, like I said, you be careful. Is it wants to overshape a little bit down lane, so they have to blend out a little bit for me to try to get to use this. I'll stick more with the symmetricals and the solids a little bit, and then segue into a ball like this.
There you go. All right, good stuff.
So we have Scott Long here. Do you guys recommend a certain amount of rev rate and or axis rotation for a layout for a 2-inch pin or less?
Oh, so 2-inch pin or less, meaning say between like the axis, like between 0 and 2 type of a thing?
Yeah.
That's what I would
like
assume
short
that
pin
is.
layouts.
Yeah. My experience has been, and you have pro shop experience as well, and Hank, you were just talking about layouts here on that. My experience has been, as far as the pins that are closer to their axis, a lot of times are very, very useful and underutilized. You know, a 1-inch pin to pap, 1.5 or 2-inch pin to pap. A lot of times I will use those personally on a shorter oil pattern, even though I'm a tweener. I don't have a big rev rate, but they're still very, very useful for me. If you're somebody who's a real high rev player that likes to see a big late change of direction, you're probably not going to get it. If you like to slide deep and you like to do that, if you are a very, if you're on the lower end of the stroker, if you have a real low rev rate and you're out to the right, you may not see that ball pick up enough, and that might not. So it could be for the extremes. That would be my feeling. For the extremes, probably not the best choice, but anyone in the middle, I think you could go a 1 or 2-inch pin on a lot of patterns. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that there's a person in this office that doesn't take a ball to nationals that has they at least have one of those. So that's a 3 or less, right? Most of us have one. Even Chad. True. So I mean, Chad, for example, is of the group that goes, and I'm going to go ahead and give him about 5 more RPMs than you, Kendall, just because of the tightness of his shirt.
Yeah, I got to get some speediums.
Even the Chad, who has a big rev rate and certainly can shape it, he's going to take a ball with a pin almost on his axis, and what it will be is going to vary, but something where if they're going up the track and you're trying to play, or he's going to bump it a little bit just because of his rev rate, but he's going to be he's going to stay out there and be in that same zone. Especially if you're trying to attack him similarly with a doubles partner or whatever it may be, trying to preserve the middle of the lane, those high rev rates, they are really going to benefit from those short pin layouts.
And you mentioned nationals, and I remember, I mean, it was just a couple of years ago when Mike Rose's team won. At the South Point, if you, especially early, if you set your ball down inside of about 15 on the lane, there was nothing but hook in front of you.
Right.
And then you're battling too much hang to the outside. And what a perfect time if you're trying to keep the ball somewhere between 5 and 15 at the laydown, crossing somewhere between 6 and 10 or so, but keeping it a little tube. A pin that's real close to your axis that's a great option.
Yeah, because the other thing I look at too is you might have a player that's very speed dominant in relation to their rev rate, and if you do a 3 or 4-inch pin from their axis, they might have enough speed that their ball never slows down fast enough, never really sees hook. And so sometimes the 2-inch pin or 2.5-inch pin from the axis might be the biggest hook and ball they own because it actually gets started and revs up. Right. And I think that's something that gets missed a lot of times too, is you get a guy that has a lot of speed but doesn't have a lot of rev rate, and they try to do a 3.5-inch pin. It's still actually too weak to get the ball to even slow down fast enough. And then you have to use a lot of surface. Yeah. And sometimes guys don't like to see a lot of surface on them a little bit too. So some players shy away from surface.
That's true.
So a 2-inch pin can actually be a big hooking ball for a certain style.
For somebody could be real speed
dominant.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So and so just if we had to throw a number on there for Scott, I mean, realistically, we're talking kind of about the extremes. If you had to or give it a range,
as far as the low end goes, I would say around 225, maybe 200, 225 or so would be. If I was going to do that, I'd say. Not for somebody where the ball turns over twice going down the lanes, but if you have a slower rev rate, which I would say would be kind of a low 200s,
right.
Or then when your rev rate gets up to 475 to 500, it's going to have to be more of a tournament condition, which is a must when you're going to bowl nationals because it's going to be flat and going to be real sensitive to different parts of the lane. So I would say that 200 to 500 window is a good window.
Yeah, and one other aspect of that I kind of wanted to touch on, and we come as ball drillers, pro shop professionals, you come across this, are those low speed players. It could be a senior player or really just anybody that has lower ball speed that still have a pretty good release. You see that a lot, and it's tough to combat that. You may have players like, and they maybe suggested a urethane ball, something that's smoother and slower off the spot. And I mean, I've come across this before, especially if the axis rotation's there. If their rev rate may not be that high, but their ball speed's slow. We're talking 10. 11, 10 and under, and they still have a decent amount of rotation.
There's a lot of great bowlers that wear the slide sock. That's what I'm envisioning right now.
I was
right?
I thought you busted me for saying slide sock. I was like, did I say slide sock?
The slide sock, and you still have that rev rate, but you don't need that braking power because you're not running to the line, so your speed's a little bit slower.
For the record, there's nothing wrong with using
nothing
a slide
wrong
sock,
with a slide sock. No,
but those players, right? If you say we're trying to limit the amount of back end hook and they're trying to control it off the spot, and maybe they don't want to get left, they don't want to be into 20, and they want to see that down and in shape. You can throw a pin over there on their axis versus going the other way. Right, so sometimes you go 6 inches, and even if it's a longer buffer, by the time though that weight block orients, it peels because again, it's ball speed. It's still the ball is only going so fast through the pattern. It's going to see the dry. So that's an option if you're tackling that with a player that has softer ball speed and everything hooks. Lay that weight block down on its side. Get it to limit that. There's enough oil in the front and of most house shots and in the middle of the body of the pattern. It's not going to burn up, but you want it to start using for those players. You want to start using energy earlier to limit that jump. You don't want. I mean, the last thing they want is to feel like somebody kicked it. And they leave a 4, 9, 10 or something like that on it because the ball just has so much. So, great questions.
Yeah, good stuff.
Question. We have a question from our friend in Louisiana, Bruce Himbert.
Bruce, how's it going?
Why do I have more success with symmetrical balls? Any idea of layouts that might help? And then the second part, I do have softer ball speed, 13.5 to 14 max.
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah,
I hear that one. We hear that one, right?
Sure.
I just can't throw ASIMs.
Yeah, because typically for that, that's what I was first initially thinking, which is the speed thing. If you're a little bit rev dominant, you still have a great roll, but you don't have quite the speed to match the roll.
And the biggest thing you're looking at is a lot of times in those symmetricals, because they are in, it is moving in an arc shape as far as when the axis is migrating, and you do have a slower response to the friction, a slower response when it's trying to find its PSA. A lot of times, Bruce, and I've told this to many, many players, is even a guy like Brian Kretzer for many years said, I can't throw ASIMs, I can't throw ASIMs.
Great
and
example.
He won his first title with an ASIM ball, but we got him to shift his mentality in the way he drilled them. Many times we'll use still like say a 4 or 5 inch pin from the axis, but we use a mass bias that's a little farther distance away, so that it takes longer for the axis to cross and get close to that line from the pin through the mass bias. Because the faster it crosses that line, the more it lines itself up, and sometimes it just doesn't. It looks like it's going forward down lane, and you still want it to create shape. So a lot of times using a little bit weaker mass biases in those balls can give you a shape that matches up better with some of those ASIMs, and that's something that people are afraid to do. Because in the very beginning, we always said, "Oh, be careful! Don't put a mass bias left of the thumb." Well, don't put a mass bias left of the thumb if it's 3 inches from your PAP, because 3-6 ratio is not very good. So, like the 2/3 ratio, if you have a 4 inch pin, you can do a mass bias up to 6 inches and not have any issues of worrying about flare. So, Bruce, I would suggest maybe doing a little bit weaker mass biases, so that you do take longer for that axis to cross along that line. And so, I'd say even in a Physix, maybe to doing like a 5x7x2 or something like that, or somewhere around that ratio. You kind of play around with it a little bit, and I think you'll get some more success out, especially with slower ball speed, because you want it to take longer to get to that lined up to cross that line. So it's just another way to look at it.
And you may need to adjust the surface too. Even
sure.
Maybe you can take that from 3,000 box finish. Maybe you can go to 4.
Right.
And that will also help get you just a little bit cleaner to the spot. So, okay,
yeah,
good stuff,
there.
Bruce.
Good
Yeah.
We have a question from James Graham.
James,
we're going to see whether Sherlock is discontinued once the Physix is out or released.
It's a good question. We need someone.
I'll jump on that one.
Jump on that one. Yeah.
As of right now, I mean, we look at when we discontinue bowling balls, we're looking at a sales cycle, and we look at over time the units that are sold over a window from the beginning and through the age as the product ages. We look for a certain number, and Sherlocks are still selling very well, and it fits a niche in our line, like Steve just said. Is hey, I still like to use a Sherlock on the fresh. It still shapes it right for me. We still sell a tremendous amount of Sherlocks, and so I don't see a Physix replacing a Sherlock. I don't see it as that ball that's to replace it, and then, okay, we're going to take a Sherlock out. We'd have to have something that read the lane similar to a Sherlock, but maybe in a different way to give us something that say, hey, okay, maybe it's time to move on from the Sherlock. And many times we make line extensions that we've had some balls in the line. I mean, you look at High Road 10 years, you look at IQ Tour, it's 6 years old now. High Road Pearl is from 13, so it's 5 years old. So all these balls, as long as we continue, as long as the pro shops and the public keep buying them, we're going to keep them. I mean, it does make it kind of difficult sometimes for distributors to hold that much different inventory, and even the pro shops to hold that much inventory.
Yeah.
But as long as products are still selling, we'll keep them in the line.
And there is, that's the head-to-head that we did for our Doppler test report was the Sherlock and the Physix, and we did the same layout, same pattern, tested them, got all the data from Specto, which we use all the time downstairs for testing, and there was a noticeable difference in shape.
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And my compadre here, Zach Trevino, we both league on Wednesday as well, and he had a great game plan. He ended up drilling an extremely strong Sherlock. And then that kind of just bled the lane the right way. I believe he shot 230 to start, if I'm not mistaken.
230 is good for me.
About 20 pins behind Kendall. But hey, that's,
and then,
I did beat Kendall this week, though. I did.
You got me. I got a little too Physix happy. I couldn't get it out of my hand. And then he went straight to a Physix after that. So the beauty of that, Hank's saying, is those balls will work together.
They play off each other really well.
So instead of replacing them, you can set your tournament arsenal up, once again, as Steve mentioned, to work together. Get those balls to play off of each other instead of having one replace the other. You can even you tell your customers this as well. The customer will have a Sherlock for a year now, and they're like, "Well, I need to get it replaced." Well, you can maybe have them work off of each other as well instead of having to replace one. So that's something to keep in mind as well as you talk to your customers and
good stuff
and other people.
Yeah. All right. Hey, before we get to the next question, just real quick, I wanted to mention we do have a website that's going to be promoting Physix. It's going to be going live on Monday. So that's bowlwithphysix.com. Bowlwithphysix.
You do have to spell physics correctly.
It redirects, but
yes, look,
we're covered.
We're
covered. We're always thinking of all the options, but yes. So
it's a great marketing plan. So it's good. That's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. So so this is a site where you're basically going to be able to go on. Your consumers will be able to go on and submit a Physix type of a question, something technical in our sport. Why does this happen? What does this? And every week we're going to be running it for 4 weeks in a row, and every week we're going to select 3 questions that are submitted, and then we're going to answer those. Chad McLean, who's our technical director, Chad's going to answer those on camera. We're going to post that video, and then those 3 winners for that week are going to actually win this exact weight block they're going to have. They're going to be able to keep on their like their desk or like on their mantle or something like that. It's a really unique thing. No one's really done that before in our sport for the consumers, and this is something that's going to be really, really cool. So it's bowlwithphysix.com. If you can help spread the word, that'd be great.
Yep, and just physics in general related questions. Doesn't have to be about the ball or about High Road X. It can be,
does a 13-pound ball hit heavier than or hit harder
actually.
than a 15 or something?
Sure.
Whatever
it could be just general technical questions. Yeah.
Okay.
So I believe it's Corey Bergeron. This one's at Hank.
Well said,
Corey.
Would a 5x3x4 work on a high-speed tweener to step down from a 4x4x2, or would you recommend another layout for drier conditions on the Physix?
Well, if it's a high-speed player, high rev player, is that what he said? High speed, high rev.
Step down to a
No. What kind of player?
a high-speed tweener.
High-speed tweener, yeah. Yeah. Sorry, the 5x3x4. If he's looking for a step down, that definitely, because you're just going to delay the distance the PAP is from the pin. So it does. You're gonna get the ball to go down the lane a little bit more. And if that's what he's looking for is a step down from the 4x4x2, yeah. I mean, a 5x3x4. I mean, the thing to remember is you're going to start to increase the distance to the PAP, so that buffer is going to get bigger. So sometimes instead of maybe doing a 5x3x4, if he's a high speed kind of tweener, I would take that back angle of the 4 and maybe take it to a 3 or 2.5, because you want that ball to still slow down enough. And in a 4, sometimes it might want to go too far, so you got to be careful for a high speed tweener, because it just could go too far before it sees the lane, especially at a 5-inch pin. So I would say still a 5-inch pin's okay, but just shorten the back buffer from 4 to 3. So something like that. Okay.
Cool.
Good question, Corey.
That's great.
Hey, I'm glad you said about layouts, because that really leads us into something that I wanted to bring up. Just recently, Alex Hoskins, we had some of the best reach and most popular videos we've ever posted, and it really dug deep into our pin buffer layout system, into understanding the 4x4x2, the 5x3x4, the 5x3x5x1, whichever layout it is, and understanding what each of those numbers means as far as ball reaction goes. And I'm sure there's many of you that are watching today that do utilize the pin buffer system. You might use the dual angle system. There's 2 basic layout systems that is what the bowling world uses now. And but these videos, if you go on to Storm Bowling on YouTube, you can check out these videos. And Alex does a great job of breaking down exactly what each of these numbers mean. What if you have what's the difference between a 5x4x2 versus a 4x4x2 versus a 3x4x2? What is just adjusting that one number but isolating the other 2?
Right.
How does that affect ball motion? And the same thing goes for the PSA to PAP distance and then the pin buffer, which, as we know, is that distance from the pin to the VAL. Adjusting just one of those components of theirs. What does that do, and how does that affect ball motion? And they're just tremendous videos. If you haven't had a chance to watch them, they're actually Bowler's Journal. It's actually featured in this month's Bowler's Journal. They actually called us and said, this is not just a hype video that's just a promotional. There's some real meat to this video, and we're hearing a lot about it, so we want to talk about it. So it's actually in this month's Bowler's Journal. That's how well done they were. So good job, Tavio and Paul. You guys did great.
All right, so we have one here from Chris Puckett. For the new rule, the new weight rule, is Storm and Rotor Grip playing with longer pin distances?
Well, Chris, hey, I need some honey. You owe me some honey.
I always love, by the way, when Hank knows everybody. First off, right? And he's always got an in some way, and so that's
Chris
that's
is a good guy.
great. That's great. I love that.
In the middle coastal area. Hopefully, he's not getting beat up by too much rain over there in the Virginia area. But a lot of times, playing with the longer pin distances, got to remember when we did our posts about what we saw without a weight hole versus with a weight hole, we saw balls without weight holes go a little bit longer. So a lot of times we said if you're still trying to get that same similar ball motion you had with a ball with a hole in it, you're probably going to get a little bit stronger pin to get it to rev more, to get it to see the lane a little bit sooner. If you like that shape out of a 4x4x2 with a hole, you might want to go to 3.5 inches just to get it to shape up a little faster. If we go farther, it's going to create even more delay. So, Chris, if you're looking for somebody to help maybe get them down the lane a little bit longer, still have some strong static weights, maybe with a little longer pin distances. It could also and manufacturing. Ernest has given me the manufacturing. I thought we were talking about. Is it manufacturing, Chris? Is that what
We've been playing with longer, I think, pin out distances would be my.
We have actually a lot of times, and now that you've prefaced in manufacturing, thank you.
Ernest is over there just doing this.
He's like, wait a minute, no.
Cue cards.
The biggest thing we've looked at in manufacturing, we've targeted more to a 3 to 4 inch pin overall, and we started doing that a couple of years ago based off the feedback we got at roundtables.
Right.
Because people wanted the pins out a little bit farther because they like to use the pin ups and the buffers, and like Steve talked about in the beginning so they didn't have to have a hole up. They could get a hole more down away from the x-axis a little bit. The biggest thing we've been playing with is trying to bring the top weights, just inching them down a little bit. You're going to see them get closer to 3. We're probably going to target between 2.5 to 3 ounces of top over in the near future. For the simple fact is, if somebody swings a CG anywhere around the ball, if there's only 280 in the top, you're still you can't get more than 3.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to start to limit that.
No more than the top.
Yeah. You know, if you have a ball with 380 in the top and you start swinging these CGs around in some spots, you could
go beyond
the 3-ounce rule, and it could create some problems. So we're going to try to move our target. If you notice, we've slowly been incrementally decreasing our top weights a little bit because there's still another, you know, you got almost 2 years that you can still use these holes, and some guys like to use a little more top weight and put some bigger holes in them right now, and that we still want to make sure we cater to both sides of our pro shops and consumers, actually.
Yep.
Does that help? I hope, Chris. Sorry.
All right, so we have James Graham. He's chiming in again. How has the Physix been received from staffers? With 2 releases on top of each other, do you see a trend of one selling stronger than the other one? High Road X is a no-brainer for most and every house shot bowler.
You talk a lot to the staff yourself, Kendall, actually. Why don't you take that one?
Yeah, no, I actually, weirdly enough, I have heard a lot of the High Road X. I mean, it's just the nostalgia of that ball altogether. It definitely caught some eyes. Just from a player standpoint, yeah, it's the Physix is going to be a ball that can really fit a lot of players, and that's one thing I kind of want us to reiterate as much as we can, because the 5 and ace, we kind of get caught in that same trend we talked about before, where players are like, I can't really throw asymmetrical balls. It's a tough one for me. Well, this one, you know, I'm getting feedback from the staffers. A lot of times they'll call in. They're able to throw this. A lot of players are able to throw this ball. You know, a lot of our video guys, Luke Rushdale, a lot of guys who post videos, they're able to express that, yeah, this is an asym ball that I'm able to throw. I'm able to really get some success with and throw for many games. And so that's kind of what I'm receiving back from a selling standpoint. Yeah, the High Road X, I mean, man, it's a beautiful ball. I mean, that nice gold, label on the black. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's nice to see it on the rack. So from a selling standpoint, yeah, Hank, I would love for you to kind of chime in and see what you'll see from the selling side of it all.
I mean, we looked at the initial ball releases. Even from distribution, the High Road X was very well stocked in distribution, just simply because it's got such a storied history to the name.
Yeah.
And the shape. And so the initial feedback on High Road X's especially is, hey, it's a no-brainer. It's that classic shape, color, going to a solid, shiny solids. And we messed around with whether we were going to bring it as a shiny. We were going to talk about touching the surface a little bit. Yeah. And in the end, based on shelf appeal and ball motion, we did go with the solid side. I mean, the shiny side of it. Thanks, Zach. So... yeah, I just look at it as a good 1-2 punch. Yeah. I mean, you look at Physix, the big ball, a lot of motion, a lot of change of direction, and people are always a little bit leery sometimes about asymmetry. They don't really, does it really fit me? A lot of players are like, I know the symmetric side. Then they'll gravitate to that side of it. But like you said, I would urge those players that have had issues maybe in the past with some asyms and things like that, is definitely give Physix a try. Yeah. It's something that does read the lane differently. It is. And it was funny that, some of the two-handers, when we were over in Korea, they were like, this ball's different. And, Kendall, you with a high rev rate, and Chad with a high rev rate, still being able to get this ball to shape the lane, really. Oh, yeah. And the nice thing about it is this weight block weighs a ton. It's one of the heaviest, most dense shapes that we make. And it's, we're maxing out trying to get the density of this piece. And so... anytime you can get that heavy amount.
You can tell a lot of that with the darkness, right? The color.
Yeah. And the biggest thing you're always trying to do is, the off-pocket hit is the one that, hey, how can I carry the off-pocket hit? And when a ball's got a lot of mass and a lot of density, a lot of weight to it, and you get the off-pocket hit, you get more equal distribution of energy going through the pins. And so sometimes those weight blocks that are taller and skinnier and not necessarily as much mass, if you don't quite shape them just as much and just as right, you kind of lose a little of that shape of that hit. So the beauty of this one is, I'm telling you, it gives you the shape, gives you the density, gives you the mass, gives you the hit. So it's got a lot of good things going for it. Yeah.
And you said some of the higher rev players liked it, and then the winner of our tournament there at Samho was Liz Johnson.
Yep.
Not a high rev player.
Nope.
And it worked easily well for all different styles. So.
And one cool thing about the High Roads as well, it's you kind of look at Star Wars sometimes. How your grandfather watched Star Wars, you watched Star. Your son watched Star Wars.
I watched Star Wars.
Yeah,
I'm not a grandfather.
I'm throwing this out there on camera right now. I have never seen start to finish any of the Star Wars movies.
I stood in line 1977 to go to the original.
That might blow up now.
So I'm going to get hate mail.
Yeah, but that's like the high road. I mean, how many, parents, my dad threw one when it first came out in 2008. I'm able to throw one now. I mean, the ball's been out for 10 years, so it's something that you were late for a while, and people, once again, it's going to continue to grow. This ball's going to be thrown for a long time. And
I remember at one point,
ages.
Anthony Pepe had mentioned that he had. This wasn't like last week. This was a while ago. He's like, you've thrown a few high roads, haven't you? Yeah. Well, how many? Just kind of curious, how many have you drilled? 29. He had 29
high roads.
That's how many. Yeah, with different layouts and different shapes, and freshen them up and different purposes, and it's a ball for, it doesn't matter what your style is, what side of the lane, what layout. It's the other thing too, when you're looking at the difference between High Road X and Physix, is going to be lane surface. Sure. It's going to be volume of oil. I mean, you've got a big difference as far as that goes, which is how much hook is there that's already built in on the lane, and a lot of times a High Road X is going to be more than enough friction between the ball and the lane. So depending on your lane surface, you might see the optimum reaction or optimal reaction out of your High Road X. But if I'm going to a tournament condition, I'm going to bowl for, there's some kind of a prize fund involved. There's going to be typically a little bit more volume of oil, more oil down. I'm going to make sure I have a Physix in my bag. Kind of along with the Sherlock line. Of course. You're going to have some you need to have some high performance bowling balls in your bag for sure for that. So.
Yeah. We'll go. We'll kick it over to Kendall for one more question here.
Got one more question here. Mike Sinek chimed in and said he stood in line for Star Wars as well. So got to have that one.
Chuk says he's drilled more high roads, by the way, than 29. So no idea how.
That's awesome. It's a great bowling ball. We have our ad that's coming out here for High Road X. We highlight some of those achievements with that, and Norm Duke, for example, 3 titles the first 2 years it came out. 2008 and 9, including the World Championship. It was in Wichita. So there's been some story. I mean, there have been some victories. Sorry to throw it. I know you.
Hey, it's okay.
It's okay.
He's not wearing any WSU stuff.
Yeah, I don't have my shocker.
A little more Weber green in here.
Yeah,
I'll work it out. It's okay.
All I know is that there's 2 buffaloes in this room.
That's right.
That's right.
West Texas. Yep, here we are.
Buffalo sandwich right now.
Yeah.
It's exotic.
It's right. Exotic.
Right.
Exotic.
It's a delicacy.
Yeah, buffalo chicken.
It's kind of gamey, but it's a delicacy. Go ahead, Kendall.
Okay.
All right, so the last one we have here, kind of chiming back to the 2-inch talk that we had. Machuga chimed in. Safe to say that those 2-inch layouts are similar to like a urethane type of reaction, or what do you think of that?
I would say similar in terms of, if I'm using a 2-inch pin, or a lot of people are, you're trying to get a little earlier break point. You're trying to get it smoother. And that's really, urethane. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, it's the pitch black has been tremendously successful because of the fact of the environment that we're in. The back ends are so clean. A lot of times we're shooting for a little bit shorter patterns. And what's happening with rev rates? How many two-handers do you see around with success nowadays? You need bowling balls. When the lane condition gets a little bit uncontrollable, you need a ball that's going to control that. And the pitch black does that. The 2-inch pin layouts or the 1-inch pin layout is going to do your best to kind of give you a little bit more control. If, for example, you're looking at some of the other technologies in our sport that have also benefited or helped associated with the urethane technology as well, you clean, you score. That was the product that we had that started Storm. It was the original product that we had in 1985, and it was designed to clean urethane bowling balls, which there were no reactives at that time. This was for high-performance urethane bowling balls. But based off of those conditions and the amount of oil and the types of oil that have changed over the years, we felt it was time to introduce a new and improved You Clean, You Score, which was, like I say, it was really as a product that started it all here at Storm 33 years ago. It doesn't seem that long ago, but it was 33 years ago. It was a long time ago. And so You Clean, You Score, one of our new products. We also have another new cleaner that we've recently introduced as well. Hopefully you have had a chance to get this into your stores, called True Blue. And it is our more environmentally friendly cleaner. There's no toxic materials that go in there, extracted root vegetables. If you get some in your eyes or on your skin, it's not going to cause any kind of irritable, breakouts, rashes, that kind of stuff. Very, like I said, environmentally friendly. And we have the video in there that hopefully you saw. Dr. Truott, who's a local bowler here. He actually, which I didn't know about True. He actually owned a bowling center when he was 24 years old. I was like, man, what an entrepreneur! Like, how cool is that? So, but he's one of our scratch bowlers around town that also is involved more with the nutrition side of things. So this is actually an item that you actually can drink. I think.
Yep. Teaspoon a day will help.
I think it keeps the system working.
Hank, would you recommend doing that?
I don't know.
Jeff Baker's on there. He drank some in Pennsylvania. I drank some in Fort Wayne.
How'd it go, Jeff?
It doesn't taste that good, but
doesn't taste good.
I guess
not harmful. There's a lot of people concerned about chemicals that are in there.
Sure.
Anything too, if you have a child or a little brother that gets your bowling bag and they're like, hey, this looks good, and they twist the top off, that can be kind of dangerous. So
can be dangerous.
Luckily, this product will not affect them if they do find it colorful and ingest it. So
it won't be harmful for them. So non-toxic and like I say, very very good for the environment. So
sure.
Okay. Any other questions? It's been a great day here. I'm glad everybody took the time out of your busy schedule to tune in. And just based off the feedback that we'll get, we'll be able to determine. Hey, I'm guessing we're probably going to have some FaceTime as well. But this is also a good time, I think, to periodically give you an update on the new technologies that we have, maybe some new products, and keep everybody in the loop with what we have going on here in Brigham City, Utah.
Yeah.
So. On behalf of myself and Kendall Miles, Hank Boomershine, Ernest Godix here, Zach Trevino, I want to thank you guys for tuning in and appreciate all your support. A lot of Storm VIP Pro Shops I know are on this call as well too, so thank you for your commitment to help sell Storm products.
Thanks again.
Guys, take care.
All right.